Hello, this is Solome Tibabu, the host of the Going Digital Behavioral Health Tech Conference. I'm so excited to have Dr. Scott Kollins here, CMO of Holmusk. Welcome, Dr. Kollins.
Thanks for having me, Solome.
Why don't we get started with, if you could share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I am a clinical psychologist by training, and I have spent the last almost 21 years in the Department of Psychiatry as a faculty member at the Duke University School of Medicine. Throughout my career, I've focused on a wide range of research, largely in kids and adults that have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That research has spanned everything from molecular genetics and brain imaging up to epidemiological studies, but have spent a lot of time studying clinical trials and new treatment development. Over the past 5 or 6 years, I started getting more and more involved in digital health and thinking about how new technology can augment the care, not just for ADHD, but other kinds of mental health conditions, and started helping some companies generate evidence and do clinical trials for novel digital products. And then similarly, in the last couple of years, started doing work in the application of data science to mental health. So thinking about how can we use big data to solve problems in mental health. And that all led up to, after thinking that I would probably spend my career in academia, this opportunity at a company called Holmusk came through last fall to come in and lead as the chief medical officer there. And this is a company that sort of combines a lot of these pieces of my background into into an opportunity to scale this and grow this in a way that I probably wouldn't be able to do in an individual faculty position at Duke. So I'm joining full-time as the chief medical officer as of June 1st.
Well, congratulations again. I'm sure you're going to be a huge asset to Holmusk. And with that, do you mind telling us a little bit more about Holmusk for those who aren't familiar?
Yeah, sure. I talked about how it brings together my background, but not really what we do. So Holmusk is a health technology and data science company. We're exclusively focused on mental and behavioral health. And what we do is sort of bring together several different really important capabilities. We bring together data assets. So we have our own data asset that is in the form of a de-identified patient database of over 500,000 patients, data that have been collected from an electronic health record over the course of a couple of decades, representing about 20 million visits. Very, very rich data from which we can build predictive models and gain a lot of insights. We combine that then with our data science and analytics capability. So the data engineers and the data scientists who can apply the methods to extract meaning from all of those data. And then we've also got a team to build digital solutions. So we can we still own our own electronic health record. We are building and have built digital products that facilitate the acquisition of new data to augment that electronic health record data that we have. Because we're of the mind, and we're building this company where we want to put data at the center, but really have a sort of a feedback loop where we're constantly acquiring new data and constantly using our analytic capabilities to build insights and get value out of that, ultimately to transform the way we take care of patients and to address some of the real challenges that exist today in mental and behavioral health.
So you've talked about how Holmusk has transformed the lives of people with behavioral health and chronic disease issues through evidence-driven medicine. How does real-world evidence impact behavioral health and chronic disease?
Yeah, boy, we could spend an hour talking about that, about the applications or how data in the real world can really help to transform care. I think one of the most straightforward ways to describe what we're doing is if you think about treatments for mental health conditions, or really in any area of medicine for that matter, but within mental health, a new treatment that a company develops typically goes through a very rigorous process of evaluating, does it work for what it's designed for? And so part of that process involves conducting rigorous clinical trials. So this is a life that I've lived for 20 years, is designing and running these clinical trials. And for a variety of reasons, clinical trials, in part because of the level of rigor that is required to run them and the level of control that is required, they don't always represent the majority of patients out in the real world. So the patients that come in to a specialty clinic at a place like Duke to enroll in a clinical trial, they're not really the representative of all the patients that we see in our clinic. So, and that leads to a lot of challenges when you get a product then out into the real world, because you're now treating patients that aren't quite the same in many ways of the patients that were enrolled in the studies to get it approved in the first place. So what we're trying to do is use this. This is what real world, so real world data is sort of the raw data that we collect as part of our electronic health record and other sources. And we're transforming that into meaningful evidence. So evidence that can actually be used to say, okay, this might be a certain way that we could use a product to treat a patient in a certain way. So that's sort of our approach in general for kind of taking the real world data, transforming it to real world evidence in a way that is ultimately beneficial for the patients.
So is real world evidence better than randomized controlled trials?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think we should think about it as better or worse. They serve different purposes. Randomized controlled clinical trials are designed to evaluate a signal, make sure that it works for what is it intended to work for the sponsor of that trial to be able to make a claim in a label for what they want to. So it serves a lot of important regulatory purposes. It's also important for evaluating safety. So that's a set of sort of problems and questions that RCTs can help address. Real world evidence addresses other sets of questions. When we get this out there in an actual sort of implementation way, how is this going to work? How, which patients for whom, under what conditions, over what time periods? RCTs typically tend to be relatively short. Often there's additional studies that are more open label and safety that factor into regulatory decisions. But real world evidence kind of answers different questions than RCTs are designed to answer for. They're both really, really important.
As you generate evidence through your massive amounts of data, how could that fuel innovation in our space?
Well, you're asking great questions. Like I said, we'll have to carve out more time in other settings to answer all these questions in full. But there's a number of ways that our data and our approach and our analytics can fuel innovation. And I'll give you a few examples. And these are, I think, exquisitely tied to the problems that we face in mental and behavioral health, because we have some of the challenges that we face in terms of how we measure our conditions, how we track our conditions over time, how we define them. We can help to address this with large data sets. So number one, we can get a clearer sense of which patients do better or maybe worse on which treatments in the real world. So knowing, kind of going back to the question around the difference between real world evidence and randomized controlled trials, that's a gap, and we can fill that gap with these real world data. We also we're hopeful, and we have preliminary sort of support that we're going to come up with new ways of measuring our outcomes. And there's lots of companies and investigators working on how can we take advantage of technology to get digital biomarkers that can index mental and behavioral health. We're doing that as well, and we're also integrating it in with all of the other rich electronic health record data that we have to really come up with ways to sort of define and objectify the conditions that we're working with. And then finally, I think that moving forward, we have ambitions to really think about how we can change and innovate the way that clinical research is conducted. Because ultimately, and this is a mandate from the FDA to really think about how real world evidence is used in the development process and in clinical research. And we think that through our combination of the data that we already have, the partnerships that we're entering into, our existing electronic health record product that we own, that we can really be a player in thinking about how to define the way that clinical research is done moving forward. So those are a few immediate things. There are other ways that we think we can innovate in the space.
Amazing. Speaking of innovations, can you tell us a little bit about Neuroblue and how does that help researchers and innovators?
Yeah, no. So Neuroblue is one of our kind of one of our flagship products that's out there that is that you can access and license. It's the portal through which anybody can get access to our data. So we are not stingy with our data. We don't give it away, but we give access to be able to get into the Neuroblue platform. Use either, if you've got support and analytics people, whether you're a life science company or a research organization, to get in and write your own code and ask your own questions. You can do that. You can also use there's sort of custom code that's already built in there to help assemble a cohort. Let's say I want to go in and say, I want to look at all the ADHD people, and I've done this because this is my area. We have almost 54,000 patients with ADHD in our Neuroblue cohort, and I can go in and segment them in different ways and interrogate the data to ask questions. So this is a way, again, to drive, and this can drive, back to your previous question, can drive innovation in a few ways. It can help companies think about product development at multiple levels. Can help researchers think about coming up with novel ways to ask questions. We think it'll be useful for people doing research for grant applications and things like that. So we're excited about Neuroblue, and especially since it's out there and available now.
Super exciting. Can you talk a little bit about how you involve providers in your work?
Yeah. So I mean, providers, well, the whole ecosystem of care is really critical, but I think getting provider input and insights is really important to us. And one way that immediately comes to mind, so we have data partnerships where we are, in addition to the data that we have, we are partnering with other organizations, health systems, to get access to their data. And in order to do that, we want to understand what the pain points for those providers are that we can help solve with our analytics and with our existing data. So we don't want to assume that any two health systems or provider groups or networks are going to have the same clinical problems that analytics and big data might be able to help with. So it's really important to engage with them to say, what are the things that you need help with? And it might be, predicting which patients are at high risk for being rehospitalized after a hospital stay. It might be predicting which patients are most likely to respond well to telehealth. Those are two very, very different kinds of questions, and we need that provider engagement to really understand that, to model and provide to refine the analytics that we provide to them.
And what about if I'm a consumer? How can I get involved with Holmusk tools and resources?
Yeah, so right now we've got there are several tools and products either in development or in the market in Asia. We've got a mental well-being app that is that's about to be launched and piloted. That's really focused as a means to kind of surveil and get access at the very beginning of when more significant clinical mental health issues might be arising, and to try to prevent that from happening through different features. So that's going to be launching soon. We've also got a couple of existing products that have focused on, because over Holmusk's history, we've been involved in longer term chronic disease management. So we have a couple of products that are focused not so much in the mental health, but more broadly in the behavioral health space. One focused on helping consumers make smarter and healthier food choices. And then relatedly, another product that helps people manage chronic metabolic conditions like diabetes and so forth. I'll steal your kind of broad question maybe from the end, but I have this broad vision that ultimately I want consumers and patients in the United States and around the world to think about Holmusk as that they will seek out providers that are using our products because their data are important, and they can control their data to make sure that it's not only benefiting their mental health, but also the mental health of others. So that's a long-term aspirational goal.
That's awesome. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about that, but I also know you recently acquired Otsuka Health Solutions, a mental health predictive analytics provider. How will this partnership transform your work?
Yeah, so that was a very strategic acquisition, in part because what OHS and the product that they had built was called MAST. It was really a very complementary to other products that we are actively building. So what OHS had developed was a tool to help optimize mental health service provision. Right now, it's deployed in 5 of the, I think, 54 mental health trusts across the UK. And it's a way to help these mental health trusts make better decisions about how to allocate resources for patient care. So thinking about how do we know or predict which patients are going to deteriorate soon versus which are going to be more stable, and that makes a huge difference in terms of really shoring up the resources that the person who's at risk for deteriorating compared to the other one who might look more similar today. So that those kinds of predictive analytics become really important. And even though the U.S. healthcare system is very, very different structurally from the NHS, but there's so many things that have already been learned in the development of the OHS tool from a provider and system standpoint that are going to be really valuable for us. So we're very excited about the acquisition and the new team members that have come along with that.
We're talking about a lot of high tech, machine learning, deep learning, digital tools. As the CMO and this new role and chapter, how do you plan to bridge all of that high tech to your ultimate goal of improving patient care?
Yeah, that's a great. I love that question. So that is central to the role, to what I'm doing, and why I was excited to join the company. I've been primarily a researcher over my years, but I've run a clinic. We see patients in our clinic every week, and at the end of the day, if we're going to be a successful health tech company, in our case, mental and behavioral health tech, the first part of that is the most important. We've got to make sure that we're focusing on the mental and behavioral health, that we're measuring it properly, that we're keeping in mind what the end goal is, which is to improve patient lives. And need to say that over and over and over again. It is easy. It's a really, really fast moving field, both health tech and data science, as you know, and just being grounded of why we're doing this and making sure we're asking asking ourselves the question about, yes, it's important to have commercial priorities, but we've got to make sure that we're sort of doing right by the patients that we ultimately want to serve.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm really excited for this next chapter for Holmusk and all of the amazing work that you'll continue to do. Thank you so much, Dr. Kollins, for joining us today.
It has been my pleasure, Salome. I look forward to the chance to chat more and participate in your future meetings.